Hi, thanks for joining me again. Well, at the moment, with the way things are, it's a little bit of a case of you either get out and do something or nothing at all. And because I'm kind of stuck mostly indoors, I can only get out locally, but it's still worth doing it. So my park for me, my local park, is really my go-to. And recently, in London, we don't get much snow. Sometimes we suddenly get a load of it, but most of the time we just hardly get anything, just a little bit of a dusting. If we're lucky. I love snow, I wish we got loads of it. And sometimes I wish I lived in a cold country where there's just tons of snow all the time, because I love it so much. And then I'd go on holiday to a hot country just to have that as an experience for a while, and then come back to being in a cold country again. The other day, got the forecast, there's going to be snow. They forecast a reasonable amount, and what we got was just a very, very light dusting. It snowed hard for about 45 minutes, and then that was it, and then it turned into rain and it was gone. And I kind of know that that's going to happen in the area that I live in. I kind of expect that. Even if they say there's going to be a lot, there's probably not going to be much at all. And this was one of those things where the snow was forecast, and it was coming at about 6:30 in the morning, and at this time of year it's dark until about 8 o'clock in the morning. And so I decided to go anyway. Parked up, got out the car, and I thought I'm going to take as little as possible. So the gear that I took with me was just the A7iii with the 20mm 1.8G. Now what I'm doing with my camera gear really is I'm going to shoot a bit of Nikon, a bit of Canon, a bit of Sony. I'm going to just mix and match depending on what I want to do. But anything where I need really low light performance is probably going to be this. I like this little combination. I think it's kind of working nicely, but you'll see me use other systems and different cameras as well in different videos. So what I did was, I just didn't take a tripod or anything. I just thought, well, if I can find stuff to rest the camera on, I'll use those as kind of makeshift tripods. And if I don't find anything, then I'll just handhold and crank the ISO up. It'd be a good experience. This is the kind of scenario where I can push the ISO and see what's possible and see what I come up with. So as soon as I entered the park, on the right hand side, there's a tiny, I wouldn't call it a lake, it's like a little pond. And there was like a traffic barrier, and I stuck the camera on that and used it as a tripod. And as you'll see in this first picture, it was at ISO 100, but it was a 30-second exposure at 1.8. So it was really, really dark, but it was snowing just very, very slightly. But the advantage with snow is, even when you get the smallest amount, is it's almost like it gives you a lot more shape into the landscape. So even at 20mm at 1.8, actually tons of the photograph is in focus. You only really notice that shallow depth of field effect if you're close, and then you do see a strong shallow depth of field effect. But as soon as you focus a little bit further away, you get a lot of the image in focus, and that's just the nature of shooting at 20mm on full frame, is that you just get a lot of the picture in focus just at that kind of wide focal length. And so this was a long exposure, but I think it kind of came out okay. This is really just more like snapshots, but this is what happened. So I got that, and I was quite happy with that. So I carried on walking further along and trying to look and think about what I was going to do, because I was walking in the dark. I was using a head torch to see where I was going. I mean, it was pitch black. There was no light really. There's just some city light in the background, perhaps in the sky, and that's about all you get. But then I thought, well, actually, you know what? There's a couple of these huts along the way, and maybe I can photograph them, because without, it's kind of hard to find anything when you're walking around the park in the dark. There's no one around, and you can't really see anything much. And I'm just trying to think from memory what might make a good location, something I can do, because it's not easy, you know, it's not easy, but I want to come back with something. So then I remember there's this hut in the wooded area at the side. I thought I'll go over there and I'll take a photo. And in this instance, I didn't have anything to put the camera on, and like I said, I didn't take a tripod. I just wanted to experiment and try stuff out. And so I found this hut, and I tried a few different angles. I was looking at the back of the camera thinking, what can I do to make this look like something? So I tried a couple of different angles out, and I kind of got something that I think was all right from that. And I'll stick that on the screen for you now so you can have a look. Now this picture was taken at ISO 12,800, f1.8, and a 20th of a second, so it's quite slow. The camera has a little bit of in-body stabilization. It's not that strong, but it's enough to help out. So I probably could have gone a bit slower. That's something I need to test out with it, see how slow I can handhold on certain lenses and get away with it. But this was no problem at all, and the picture cleaned up a little bit in Lightroom nice and easily, and it kind of worked. And you can sort of see in the background that little bit of color coming through is just the city lighting, if you like, just glowing in the sky, just catching slightly, and you couldn't really even see that with your eye. Everything just looked dark, but that's the direction of the city, and you could see this kind of glow coming through this sort of slight orange color. I think that the snow kind of helps give a bit more shape to it and bring the thing to life. I think this wouldn't have really worked particularly well without the snow being there. This kind of angle and shot, I tried a few different angles, and I felt like this was as if you were just stumbling across this. I tried to give an angle where I wasn't framing the thing up as in, here's the big hut in the woods. It was more like as if you were discovering it. The intention was more to look as if you were passing by and then seeing it from perhaps as you pass by the tree, like, oh, there's a hut there. It's almost as if you're glancing across to it. But at the same time, I wanted to have those pathways that are on the ground there where people have walked before. Give you some sort of direction as to how to get to it and where to go to it. So that just gives it a little bit more interest. Hopefully gives it something. And in the end, I thought it was an okay picture. It was reasonable. It's not something that's going to go into a portfolio or anything like that. But it was okay to have it. It's something I'll probably stick on Instagram. And I thought it was a nice picture anyway. But after that, I carried on walking, and I found like a little lake, but I didn't particularly like the photos that I took there. I just didn't think it really worked that well. There's just, because there's no light, sometimes it just doesn't give you anything. So I just pushed on ahead, and by that time it was snowing a lot harder. And I knew that there was another hut further down, and I know for a fact that they always seem to leave lights on there. So I thought, okay, that could be interesting to have a hut where they leave lights on. And I went down, and initially when I got there, I couldn't figure out a good composition for it, because every angle that I could actually physically get to seemed to, the building just sort of felt lost. And then I wandered over to where there's this footpath that kind of angles upwards, and I walked into that, and that allowed me to drop down a little bit further, and suddenly it felt right. It felt like I had a direction that worked. And sometimes when you get to different locations, it is a case of wandering around, and this is something I push quite a lot. My feeling always with landscape photography is that you have to spend a little bit of time in the environment. Don't just shoot the first angle that occurs to you. It's spend a little bit of time looking around, trying things out and experimenting, because there's usually one angle that's really, really good for a subject, and it's not necessarily that obvious. Sometimes you have to see things from different angles in order to be able to find that, but I think I've got it anyway. So I'll stick the picture on the screen for you now so you can have a look at it. And the settings for this one, again, it was at 20mm f1.8. It was at 1/25th of a second and ISO 2500. Now the ISO was lower now because the building had lighting, so the ISO could drop down, and I found that gave me a good exposure. And the orange lights on the inside allowed me to get this kind of two-tone blue and orange lighting, and I thought that looked quite good. What I like about this picture is it gives you this feeling that it's very cold on the outside, and that the inside is very warm, like there's a lit fire in there and some food and something to drink, that you'd go in and it would be really cozy on the inside, and you're outside and it's really, really cold and snowy and icy. And that contrast comes across well with the colours, which was just natural. I mean, the colours come like that out of camera, because your inside and outside don't balance like that. You get that orange and blue tone naturally, which is always good if you don't have to fight the natural colours if they're already there in the first place. And then when you edit and you just bring out some contrast and so on, then it just enhances the overall mood. And I think for me that made the trip successful, because the other pictures I got before I didn't think so much of, but for this one I thought that it was something that was more usable, something I was happier with and more proud of. And it was one of those things where it pays off. Sometimes you can neglect your local areas and the locations that are around you, but I do keep going back to this park, and each time I go, I think I've exhausted it and that there's nothing left to get. And most of the time I don't get anything. But sometimes I do. Sometimes it just comes together and I get something and it was worthwhile. So it is worth revisiting places, even if you think that there's nothing left there anymore, because it can easily feel like that. If you think about the area that you live in, you may think there's nothing there, but maybe you're wrong. Maybe there is stuff there and you just don't expect it. Sometimes it's a case of the situation has to come together. It has to be like this picture would not have worked in the daytime. It only works because it was pitch black, but the lights were on in this building, and that's how the shot came about, and it turned into something. So it can depend on, you could walk around in the daytime and say, well, there's nothing here, but you could walk around there at night time and suddenly it comes to life and it turns into something. Maybe it's a case of doing that, or in the right weather conditions. A few things have to come together often for something to work, and that's true of most landscapes. There's a lot of landscapes that will not look like anything unless the light does something magical. And when the light does something special, suddenly the whole place comes to life, and then it becomes obvious what to do. So it is worth revisiting and trying things out, and not thinking that you know how it's going to be in these conditions, or that you're trying to preempt anything. I think preempting, trying to think ahead and plan what you think something might be like, is usually a total disaster, because the reality is you can't predict something. Like, I didn't know I was going to get this photo. I didn't plan to get this photo. It just occurred whilst I was there and doing it, and then it suddenly turned into something. So maybe that's something you can do as well, is try and explore your local areas more and try and get something out of that and see what happens. You might surprise yourself and get something that you really like. Anyway, I hope that was good. Take care, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks. Bye bye.